Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Eye on Oshkosh. I'm your host, Cheryl Hentz, and we have got a really full house tonight. This is the most guests we've ever had on this show, going all the way back to 2002. But it's going to be an exciting show with a lot of information that folks, especially those who live in the city of Oshkosh, will want to take note of. So, to my right is my co-host, Sarah McAninch. To her right is current City Councilman Paul Esslinger. To his right is Cari Tetzlaff. Cari is a community activist. Next to her is former Deputy Mayor and Common Council member, Deb Allison-Aasby. And seated next to her, bringing us all together, is Mike Ford. Mike used to be on the Oshkosh Common Council, and he is currently not only on the school board, but the recently elected school board president. So congratulations, and thanks to all of you for being here. We appreciate it. And we also want to thank you for not giving the school superintendent a raise this year. It is small, I know, but every little bit helps. Now, if we can just get the city council to follow suit, that would be great. We want to talk about topics that are going on in the city and, some of the ways in which money is being spent. It seems like we must have money trees growing all over in the community the way the city wants to spend money. So the first thing we want to talk about is City Center and the proposed purchase thereof. $12.5 million. It probably won't turn out to be that much. It'll probably be a little bit less, but that's the asking price right now. So I guess, and Paul, I know that there's certain things you can't talk about with respect to this project because it's not a done deal yet. There's still negotiations going on. You've been in closed session, and I know you can't talk about those things. But I guess here's where I'm thinking about this. We've had people from Go EDC come forward and show fancy PowerPoints or presentations as to how great this is going to look when it's done. We've got some images here that we can bring up also as we're talking about it. But if it's such a good deal and it's going to bring so much traffic and so much money into downtown, why are the current owners of City Center, formerly Park Plaza, why aren't they doing it themselves if it's such a great deal and such a moneymaker?
Well, I guess there are probably many answers to that question. Number one is they have an interested party with the city of Oshkosh. And so, the city of Oshkosh is, I guess, have deep pockets, some people believe. And, when you do deals with government entities, those are pretty cut and dried. You get paid immediately, and you wash your hands and you walk away. And I think the negotiating with municipalities is a much easier process than if you were to do that with developers. Developers, and I don't mean any disrespect to anyone, this is what they do for a living. They have to make money. Mm-hmm. They scour everything. They inspect everything. They have to make money. So their money is extremely important for them. So mm-hmm. the criteria that they use and the process that they use is a very exhausting process. So, the city is, I don't, to be honest with you, the sellers, I think, I would do everything that they're doing. I would be doing the exact same thing. Mm-hmm. In fact, they'd be crazy not to. I mean, why would you not do that?
Well, sure.
The sellers are, I've met Mr. Kepler, nice guy. I don't know Mr. Larson. And the other gentleman, but so they have an interested party, and it's just up to the council now to make the decision of whether they want to go forward or not.
Do you know, and I know, well, you've been on and off the council, do you know how this actually got started? Because I don't think they've tried to sell this on the open market, have they?
Well, I've heard conflicting stories. Number one, Mr. Roloff was still the city manager when this really kind of started. Mm-hmm. And I think the owners of City Center approached Mr. Roloff and asked him, because at that time we were looking for a city hall. So they asked him if the city would be interested, and Mr. Roloff unilaterally said, no, we're not interested. Well, he doesn't really get to say that. I mean, that's a council decision, that is not a city manager decision. And so it's, from my understanding, at first, the city was asked if they want to be part of it. Now we have Rebecca Grill, the new city manager. It's been told to me that when she came on, she went back to the folks at City Center, said they want to be involved, but she said that the City Hall part probably is not the best use for that property, but we wanted to help develop it. I think everyone agrees that the property is probably come to the way it is now. It's come to its useful end of its life. It either needs to be repaired or it needs to be raised, and so I think everyone agrees with that. It's just how what goes into it and how the city is involved, and if the taxpayers want to do that undertaking, and that's what 7 members of the council are going to decide.
So what I saw when I went to the city's website and I was looking at plans for the overall part of downtown, is that the plan, and I understand it's just a plan, it could change, but what is showing right now as part of the plan is to tear that building down, to completely raise it, and then remediate whatever needs to be remediated. And it also said that the city would work with the current tenants to extend their lease until such time they could no longer extend it. That's not very definitive. Those business owners need to, I think, have a little bit more notice than that. But one thing, if the city buys this, as soon as the project closes, the sale closes, and it becomes the city's, it comes off the tax rolls as of that date, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So that means that we would be losing about $300,000 a year in taxes on that property until the city did whatever it needs to do and put up new structures or let the developers buy it, whatever they have in mind. They don't really know what they're going to do with this, do they?
No, they don't. And that's one of the problems I have is if you're asking the citizens, the taxpayers, and by the way, there's some notion I've heard from a couple people now that there are no tax dollars involved in purchasing this. I don't know if Santa Claus is coming early with a $12.5 million check or how that works, but to the best of my knowledge, it's going to be tax dollars in one way, shape, or form. There's so many unanswered questions, Cheryl. And as you appropriately said, there's at least two elements in the executive session that unfortunately I can't discuss here tonight that I think are very pivotal, whether this should be done or not. And so you have the purchase as one element of this deal, but then you have the future. And again, if you're going to be asking for $12.5 million from people, you have to say, well, you have to make it kind of cut and dried. We're going to buy it, we're going to tear it down, here's the estimated cost to do that, remediation of property, infrastructure is going to be, and you have the list. And nobody has done that yet.
Have they done any geologicals on the site so far?
There was a phase 1 study, which is basically just you go back into the history and you go into books to look at what has been on that property over the years. And of course, as we all know, all those properties along the river have all been, with woodworking, and they had toxic materials that quite literally that you would just dump outside when you got done using them. So So the next thing would be a phase 2, where you would do soil borings to make sure or find out if there are. And I think it's pretty clear that I would say there's most likely going to be some. So.
Well, sure. And even if everything was fine when Park Plaza was built in the 60s, that doesn't mean it's fine today, because the government always tightens up things.
Well, the environmental standards back in the 60s are a lot different than they are today.
Right, yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So again, with the contaminating, I was looking at an 1879 handwritten map of downtown. And not only were there mills, but there was foundries, there was a train depot that eventually got burnt down, and then they just made it into basically a trailer cart area. And I think, it's so much more than just the lumber mills. There is a ton of stuff that was there before most of Main Street burnt down.
Well, if you go back and look at what was the Wisconsin Public Service property, which is now the Leach Amphitheater. Now it was a little bit different. They burned off coal there, and it became coal tar, and that got into the ground. And I don't know if that's the same thing here, but that property was so badly contaminated that the state wouldn't even allow us to remove. What happens when you remediate property like that? It gets burnt. You have to burn it. And so we couldn't even remove it off of the property. The state made us burn it right on site. So that's how bad it was. And, it costs a lot of money to remediate those situations.
Well, and that's just my follow-up to the question I had when we were talking was, so Mill on Main was able to get a TIF
Yeah.
to help.
Yeah.
Can we do that with city property? Could we get something like that to help with remediation and pay for some of this
Yeah,
stuff?
and that's the part, quite frankly, I think the city, if we needed to get involved with the remediation, if someone else were to buy it and we had to be a partner to get remediation dollars, which cities can get, I would be all in favor of that. I think that's something that we can do. And I just remember, in the election that we just had, that people are asking, what role does the government have? And I think this is one of the roles that the government should have, is if developers can't, or it's too expensive for developers to use money to do this, and we can do this through our leverage with the state or the federal government, then we use it. I don't have any problem with that. But again, if you don't have answers to the people that you're going to be taking their money from, and you can't answer their questions. I mean, people are calling me, I'm embarrassed. I mean, people are calling me saying, well, what are we going to do when we get the property? I don't know. Well,
Yeah.
Paul, you're a council member. Why in God's name don't you know? Because no one told me. And so then how can you vote in favor of buying something if you don't know what we're going to be doing with it?
We've got a couple of graphics that I'd like to bring up of what City Center is potentially going to look like. Can we bring those up now, please? There we go. There's one. So I honestly don't even know what we're looking at here. I mean, I can't figure it out. Do you know, Paul?
Yeah, I had a meeting when I just got reelected with a gal from the Go EDC staff and the community development director. There were a couple different proposals, and these are just, I think, computer renderings of what a concept, someone's concept could be. So, quite frankly, Cheryl, I mean, that you could probably have 100 different renderings there, and
Yeah.
we don't. I mean, if you don't even know what you're going to do with it, if you don't know where you're going to fix it or raise it, then those renderings really, I don't mean this to
Let's
be mean,
look
but
at the next one, please. There. Now that,
It's going.
I mean, that looks a little bit more like what we currently have now, and yet not so much. But one thing that we've kind of noticed with these renderings is that I don't see any solar panels anywhere on these buildings. And, if we're going to be talking about sustainability and so forth, and we do have a sustainability board or commission in this community, I would think that in renderings, we should show some kind of solar panels or something.
well, I understand what you're saying, but I think if I looked into my crystal ball, if we do purchase this, I think the fact is going to be that most of that's going to get torn down. So, if you're gonna have to get that site ready for redevelopment for contractors, it has to be developable. I mean, from the start. And so, tearing that structure down, and then doing the remediation on the land. So I don't really see much of the Now the 4 imprint building is a different story. That I think would remain, but the city center itself, I believe. I could be wrong, but I think
Yeah.
it's probably going to get torn down.
Well, I think that this is another conceptual rendering, though. But either way, even if we went back to the first one, or the one, and this is the one that I believe they maybe showed at the council meeting. I'm not 100%, but I don't see any solar panels on any of what they're projecting this to look like. I would hope that if we're going to do something, somebody, somewhere along the way is going to be,
That's the one, isn't that the?
that's another one. But I don't think that's the one that was shown at the council. Either way, I don't see anywhere where there's any solar panels. I see rooftop parking, which in a city that has snow 5 months out of the year, I don't know why anyone in their right mind would want to park on top of a building, but whatever. Okay, my last question on this before we move on to our next topic. When the Oregon Street Bridge gets redone, they're going to have to take a lot of land on each end because it's no longer going to be a drawbridge. It's going to be a long approach on each end and then gradually going higher and higher, and it will just, at the highest point, it will be, way up here, and the river will be way down here. But you're going to have to take up a lot of space. Presumably, some businesses along the way may get lost in taking up some of this additional space. Is there a potential that if we buy City Center that we may lose some of that space in this process?
Well, I think the plans for that bridge are pretty much hammered out. I know the state has either purchased or is going to be purchasing the Chamber of Commerce building on that corner there. And so they know basically how much land they're going to need, and I believe they've talked with the engineers here at the city regarding all that. So I'm assuming that the staff knows pretty much what's going to remain and what's going to have to be removed. And I, to the best of my knowledge, with that bridge, I don't think it's going to get wider per se. So I don't think there's going to be any property. It's the property would be to the north and south that they would have to purchase, but I don't think to the east and west.
And who did you say is buying the chamber building?
The state of Wisconsin.
Oh, the state. Okay. All right. Okay. Do you guys want to weigh in at all, or should we move on?
They're just awed
You're
with my
smart,
answers.
Mike. You're smart. Don't say it. You're like, I'm staying away.
All right. Well, let's just briefly talk about this bike pedestrian bridge over 41 that's supposed to go in between Witzel and Highway 21. And of course, we've got some renderings of that as well. So now there's one rendering. That looks like a railroad type bridge to me. Then we have that one, which I don't understand what all those little swirly things are all about on the other side of what I presume is the highway. I mean, I don't know what that is or why we need to have anything that looks like that. That looks very expensive.
That's a ramp.
A
to help
ramp?
with descending from that height to get over the highway. You need to be careful with the incline of the ramp so that you're not going to pick up such sufficient speed on the way down on a bicycle or pushing a stroller that it becomes a safety risk. So that's kind of why it's designed that way in a spiral.
Okay, well, that looks too expensive to me. You know, I'm all about safety. You know, I think pedestrians and bicyclists, whoever, they should be safe in crossing any street. But before we go spending $2 million plus, couldn't we try what we currently have at the roundabout crossings at Murdoch and Jackson? You know, there's flashing lights. If you have your windows down, there's also a voice that's yelling at you. I don't know what it's yelling. Do you know, Sarah?
Stop, pedestrians. Stop.
Okay.
Something like that. Yeah.
So that might get someone's attention. But you know, can't we try something much less expensive before we go proceeding with a bridge like this? I know you didn't get much support for stopping this, but you know, things can be stopped at any time. Why can't we consider a less expensive option here to see?
Cheryl, may I?
Yes,
speak to
by
this?
all means, please.
So I cross through the Jackson, Murdoch roundabout quite frequently. And this is one of those things where typically, and you'll see on social media, if something occurs, it's automatically the driver's fault. But I can tell you firsthand, one of the challenges is that many people don't actually push the button to alert.
Oh, okay.
And I've seen that there's also flags, over by Witzel, and
Yep.
you'd be surprised how many pedestrians and bikers never use the flag. They never
Right.
press the button. So if you're coming around, even if it's, within a reasonable speed, you don't see them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's both driver awareness, but it's also biker and, bike and walk pedestrian responsibility to make sure that
Yeah.
they're hitting those. And I think because of the number of incidences, I think that's why they're looking for an alternative. I'm just not 100% confident that $2 to $4 million is the answer either, but I don't think there's been enough discussion in the community to really make that decision.
And yet the council just wants to move forward with, you couldn't even get a second to your.
The mayor seconded it finally to
Well,
basically
yeah,
discuss
but I mean,
it.
it was just to get it on the table so you could talk about it.
Yeah.
But without him doing that, it would have died for lack of a second.
Correct.
So I don't know, is this something that you might try again to have them look at some different options? Or do you feel it's just?
Oh, I won't be touching that anymore.
Okay, all right. Fair enough
I did
then.
what I did, that's it. Nope.
I'm in favor of the pedestrian bridge. Initially I was really skeptical about this project. I think what changed my mind, Vicki Redland posted a lot of information. She's on bike and ped commissions, has been on various bike and ped commissions, and the Bike Fed. And apparently this bridge is a part of a much larger conversation than I was aware was happening. I guess for the past 20 years there's been initiatives to try to create a more walkable and bikeable Oshkosh, and connecting both sides of town is the goal of what this bridge is. I'm not sure this location, this is probably above my pay grade, Cheryl, but I'm not sure this location is the right place, but I believe that we need infrastructure like this to connect both sides of town, to help, like if kids on the west side want to go to Pollock Pool, or if folks are biking. I don't feel safe going through the roundabouts on the west side, and I've seen people nearly get hit. I've been the car that watched several cars ahead of me not respect a pedestrian, and then I'm the one that stops.
Yeah.
And sadly, like the night that was voted on at our last council meeting, somebody got hit in one of those roundabouts on a bike. So to me, I'm willing to spend tax dollars on something that could save a life. But yeah, again, the location of it is the one kind of question I had, is this the best spot to have it? But I think we need one.
And I think also we need to have some police at these roundabouts giving people tickets if they're not slowing down and yielding to not just oncoming traffic, but pedestrians. Again, whether they're on a bike, if they're in a wheelchair, they're walking, pick out 1 or 2 roundabouts and have some police presence there, just like they do at schools at the beginning of school each year.
Maybe we should talk to Axon, right? Put a couple extra more cameras in those places, and then you can be able to catch them in the process.
All right. Well, we're going to talk about cameras. One thing that I want to bring up, and Mike, I know you're not on the city council now, but you were, and so I definitely, jump in whenever you want to here. Our city manager is currently using a company called Innovative Public Advisors. Innovative Public Advisors. This is a company that she's using, basically, it's a third-party vendor. She's outsourcing the vetting of people's resumes and using them to make recommendations on employees or potential employees that should be granted an interview. Now, I don't know how much money this is costing us right now. I sent information out requesting that information. As of the last time I looked before coming on the show tonight, I hadn't gotten an answer, but maybe I still will get one today yet. But, she boasts about, on the one hand, how she saved the taxpayers like $40,000 with the Humane Societies, cutting their budget. And she also boasts about how much money is being saved by bringing the social media in-house. But what she's not being transparent, and that's her word that she really gets off on, is transparency, transparency, transparency. Yet she's not being transparent with the public in saying, while I'm saving this money over here, I'm spending this much money over here. And my problem with this is she's making over $200,000 a year. What is it, Paul? $216,000, $209,000,
Give or take a couple of
something
bucks,
like that. But it's over $200,000 a year. And we also have a human resources department and we have a personnel department. If those two departments and a highly paid city manager can't do that job, then maybe we need to find people who can do that job, because why should we be outsourcing this to another company? Paul, do you know, has she brought it up to even the council that she's outsourcing all this stuff?
No.
Okay, well, now you know.
Well, I mean, and this is one of the issues that I have with this form of government. You know, we've hired a city manager now, and the reality of the situation is we've kind of turned the keys over to the home to her, and she runs it. And so when you start asking questions like that, which are very good questions, now you're a micromanager, and you shouldn't they do what they do, and you do what you do. And then you just vote yes with whatever they bring forward to the agenda. You just vote yes, and you go down the road. Everyone's happy, and you know, I don't. I'm a representative of the city, and if I feel something needs to be done, or I need to represent the people that vote me into office, if they have questions, I want the questions answered. And so there's a little bit of a little bit maybe of a difference of opinion on how it works there. But I agree with you when you're talking about people that run the show are talking about cutting dollars, the Humane Society, you know, and then you're outsourcing things like this, which I've got to think this has got to cost them at least $40,000 for these different looking at these different positions. You're right. I mean, how do you justify cutting something, helping animals to having someone doing your job for you? I don't. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, yeah. I mean, I just don't know. And you know, you had talked, Paul, about, you know, we know that she doesn't live in this city, but you pointed out to me some other people who don't live in the city either. One of which is our community development director, the person who pushes for the city to have development in it. And yet this is a person who doesn't live here. Our new communications and community engagement director, I guess, doesn't live here either, nor does our IT director. Now, of those four, the IT director is probably least of a concern to me, but the other people, I know that state law says we can't tell these people where to live, but I think it should be incumbent upon these folks to want to live in a community whose attributes and wonderful things they're pushing. I mean, they're pushing for people to move here, to build here, to have businesses here, but yet what message is it sending when they themselves won't live here? I don't understand it. Thoughts, guys? Talk to me.
Again, I go back to the Walker administration. They made that change. I mean, historically, city managers, that was one of the biggest selling points was residency requirement being vested in your city. We had that in Wisconsin. Now we don't.
So under Scott Walker, then,
That's
this
when that
was
changed.
changed?
Correct.
Okay, I didn't know how far back.
I think
this
what he's
went.
talking about under the Act 10 thing.
Okay.
It was one of those things where there's a million things on the table, and well, if you get rid of this one, then I'll get rid of this one, and so then at the end nobody's happy, but they're happy because they've solved the problem. And
Yeah.
you create more problems than you solve.
Yeah.
I was talking about. That's okay. It was
I like the.
well, it was standalone. It wasn't part of a giant compromise. I mean, that was a big issue that folks were campaigning on. It was specifically tied to the residency requirement in Milwaukee. It was driven by the firefighters and police unions in particular, were the interest groups that were most powerful fighting
So
that.
this
So, I
is
mean,
one
there's
thing
a
that I
history
don't
there,
understand.
yeah.
So can anybody, I mean, if you're a police chief or a fire chief, are you required to live in the community that you serve?
The only exception to the rule is you can have certain mileage requirements if it's something where
Okay.
you have to be on call
Okay.
to make sure you
Gotta
can
live within a
get
certain
there,
range.
Get there
Okay.
in time.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Cheryl, I mean, look at it this way. Michael was on the city council. I'm on the city council. We have to live in the city
That
to
was
be
on
on
the
the
city
city council.
Right.
Michael's in the school district. He cannot be a member of the school district in Amro or Fond du Lac,
Right.
and he shouldn't be. Nobody should be.
Right.
So the people that are voting on, and the city manager has a lot of power. I would argue as much or more than a council member, because as you said, they're bringing this stuff forward. They're doing the analysis. This is their job, and to not live in, and you should have pride. And if you're a department head or a city manager, you would think you'd have the pride to say, I'm the Oshkosh city manager, and I live in Milwaukee. What? That makes absolutely no sense. And then the fact of that matter is, you're right, $200 and some $1,000 salary, plus the benefits that go along with that. And so the people that you're telling every year when you create a budget and you want that budget passed, those individuals are paying your salary, and you don't have so much as a water bill that you have to pay
Right.
for.
And I want to bring up one other thing with respect to that, because this just goes to show how I think one-sided her contract is. The city will reimburse Ms. Grill's moving expenses under the conditions outlined in the city employees handbook. But in summary, it says that the city will cover reasonable costs of relocation with 100% of the costs should the employee reside in the city, or 50% of the costs should the employee reside outside the city. And in addition to that, if Ms. Grill moves to the city and is residing within the boundaries of the city of Oshkosh, the city will contribute $10,000 net after taxes to be used toward the purchase of a home in the city of Oshkosh. What? Why are we paying this woman if she decides to move here? Why are we paying her $10,000 to put toward the purchase of a home? Why should we be buying her part of a house?
You sounded like Paul Esslinger in the executive sessions when we were going
Oh.
over. I asked all of these questions too, and I was blown out of the water. It's like, Paul, you don't understand this. This is how it works. And these individuals get this type of money, and this is what we need to do to get them.
But they don't get this type of money. We've looked it up. The state average, where do I have this? I put this in here. State average for a city manager in the state of Wisconsin is, I can't find it here in my sheets, but it's around $125,000, $130,000 a year, and we're paying her over $200,000. Here we go. The average salary of a school superintendent in Wisconsin is $157,586. Some higher, some less. But Brian Davis right now is making $234,000 a year. So again, that's like $80,000, $90,000 a year more than the state average. And Rebecca Grill is actually, I put it down here, $216,300 for someone who doesn't live in the city and but who wants businesses to relocate here. And yet, we'll give her $10,000 toward the purchase of a home if she moves here. I don't understand this.
I'll say two things. I mean, one, I
Yeah,
think
go
those
ahead,
numbers,
please.
context is really important. You know, whether you think someone's underpaid or overpaid.
Mhm.
There's 424, I think it's 421 now, school districts in the state of Wisconsin.
Right.
OASD, I believe, is the ninth largest. So you're including every superintendent in that. It's
Mhm.
a really different thing to have a school district with 9,000 students compared to a school district with 150 students. They should be paid differently. Same deal with the city
Mhm.
manager. I was just in Lake Mills doing some work with their city manager, right? That person is running a much smaller city with a much smaller staff with fewer services, so
Mhm.
they would ultimately be paid less.
Sure.
When you're looking at the city manager community, yeah, your Oshkosh, Eau Claire, probably those two are going to be the highest paid just by market. But I think the bigger point, and I think it speaks to what Paul said, is ultimately it's democracy. It's the majority of the council making this decision.
Yeah.
We can love it or hate it.
Yep. Well, that's
but,
true.
But that's the issue.
That's why
right?
I have a
That's
problem with some of
100%
the people on
factual,
the
yep.
council.
That's true.
Well, I mean, do you all feel the same way we do, that it would be nice if those particular people, those titles, were living in Oshkosh? Or do you
I agree
not
with
think it's a
that.
big deal? I don't know how everyone feels about it.
I think perception is reality. And so, as we know, the housing situation has not been ideal, since COVID. In all fairness, housing stock is certainly different than it was pre-COVID. But with that being said, if there are significant reasons why you cannot live in the community or within that area, if you are the face of an organization, so whether it's the school board or it's the county or it's the city manager, it's how much, are you available to the public? And I think the one thing that's going on right now is, taxpayers are looking for a return on investment. And it's not just property, it's also in personnel. So if you have someone who's
getting that type of salary, and the community feels like they're getting a return on investment on that. They feel like they're getting results. Things are improving, that, they're out and about in the community. And again, it's a balance, because obviously it's a tough job. There's a lot of responsibility, but you also have to be willing to be available for things like interviews and questions, and, also take accountability. Nobody's perfect, and, the bigger the position, the more the responsibility, the more chances that there are for missteps or mistakes. But it's, acknowledging them, admitting them, and then the plan to move forward. So, the salaries are relative, it's deserving if they're producing. That's my opinion.
That's well said. You made me think of something someone told me once too. The higher you get on the totem pole, the more of your rear end is showing.
Yeah.
So you gotta be careful on that. But no, I agree with what Deb said. I mean, for me, number one is, are you getting the job done?
Yeah.
That's more important than any of these other things. But yes, I'd rather have somebody here who's not, all things being equal.
Sure. All right. Well, let's talk.
Well, Cheryl, if I could just maybe add
Sure.
one final thing to that.
Yep, sure.
If you look at our friends to the north of here, Neenah, Appleton, Green Bay, who all have mayors,
Full-time elected mayors.
full-time elected
Yes.
mayors, their salaries in Appleton and Green Bay are around $115,000 a year.
Yeah,
And they would be required to live in Neenah, Appleton, Green Bay, wherever
because
the case
they'd
may
be
be.
an elected official.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I would say that Neenah, Appleton, and Green Bay are doing pretty well.
I think so.
In fact, there'd probably be some people that would say they're doing better than Oshkosh.
Mm-hmm.
Yet, and Deb is right, there is a perception and the dollar amount. So why are we paying $216,000? And we have some issues, arguably, where other communities are paying $100,000 less, and arguably could be said that are doing better.
Yeah. Well, and so that comes back to the form of government that we have. You and I, years ago, were very much, we started a core group of people, and from there it sort of fanned out. And we took baby steps. We got the mayor to be an elected mayor who's elected by the people, not the rest of the council. But, we were going to move in the direction of a change of government. And I think that now might be the time. We talked about it shortly after the election and thought, okay, let's see what this current council does. But if they choose to go ahead and buy City Center, when I don't think we have the money to do that, nor do we belong in the real estate business. And I've heard this from a number of people. I know you've talked to people. If the council majority votes to buy City Center, I think that will be a nail in the coffin to start moving toward a change of government. Have you heard that from folks? I believe you have.
Yeah, and to either further that, I mean, I'm a conservative guy, so I know a lot of conservative people, and they certainly aren't. They don't want us to be in the real estate business, and they're very frustrated and fed up, and they're talking about changing it. And then I know people that are very liberal, and I've asked them, what are you hearing on the other side, so to speak? And they have said basically what you did, that they're frustrated and they've had enough of this. And so if you have people that are the liberals of the liberals and the conservatives of the conservatives that are on the same page on something,
That's pretty miraculous.
it's almost impossible to do that.
Yeah.
Especially in today's climate, it's impossible. And so when you accomplish, I don't know if it's accomplishment or not, but when that's a fact, that's a recipe for something to happen.
Wouldn't that be a fun show, Cheryl? Is to have the city manager form of government, and then those that believe in the mayoral form of government, and let them go to town and make sure you have gloves and make sure it's a 2-hour show.
Believe me, it's on my radar in case this.
Well, if you need somebody, Cheryl, anyone that knows me know that I think the single most destructive thing we could do as a municipality is to change our form of government. I think there's a reason the majority of municipalities, of cities in the state of Wisconsin, have either a hired administrator or a hired city manager. Mm-hmm. There's a reason the decades of research on it have shown that high conflict councils, high conflict municipalities where we have strong ideological divisions do so much better under this form. Otherwise, the risk is we get stuck in this this swing set,
Mm-hmm.
where instead of having 7 people who are in charge of accountability, 7 people who are in charge of setting policy forward, we have one individual on the far left, switches the next 2 years to somebody on the far right. And if you look at places like Wausau that are experiencing it, it's an utter disaster. So that really, really frightens me. Now that said,
But look
people
at
can ask for
Appleton
it.
and Nina.
Appleton is the exception. That's great. Every city should have the form of government they want. Nina's actively having discussions to change, and there's a reason for that.
Okay. Well, when we do that show,
Yeah,
I'm gonna
I'd love to
call
be
you.
on there.
I'll call you and have you on. We want to talk about flock cameras also, and this was a very interesting thing. So the city recently approved a year-long contract to continue to use flock cameras. The very day afterwards, an emergency council meeting was called because the chief of police called the city manager and council members saying that something had been brought to his attention that clearly stated or showed that the company who was selling us on these cameras was not being 100% authentic or honest, whatever word you want to use. And so they right away said, no, I don't think that, the chief said, I can't in good conscience recommend this, so they basically washed their hands of the company, did away with the contract, and I think later that day even, or maybe the next day, bags started going up over the cameras. But here's the problem with that, and Cari, I'm going to let you take the lead on this for sure. You and I believe Jacob Amos from the council approached the city and wanted, well, first of all, let's go back. The chief of police and the city manager and the then council members all had information that you folks had dug up on how these were not the right thing to use, how the company was misleading, and these people in charge basically ignored you guys. They just said, whatever. And you couldn't even get them to sponsor or to hold on their own a town hall meeting, right? So tell what your situation was.
There's a kind of a broad coalition of concerned community members surrounding this technology, ALPR technology, which is automatic license plate readers, Flock being one brand amongst many. Some of the concerns that citizens have are that they are potential Fourth Amendment right violation and that they're capturing data of drivers' patterns of life, their routines, where they're traveling through the city, regardless of whether the citizen is suspected of a crime. And that information is transmitted broadly to other places. So here in Oshkosh, we are transmitting that data to over 500 other agencies. So even if you had a strong belief that our police department here in Oshkosh was doing a wonderful job, if you believed that Oshkosh Police Department had great guardrails in place or good protocols, good auditing, you would also have to trust that over 500 other agencies had just as good of protocols in place. So these were some of the concerns citizens brought up, in addition to the fact that Flock reps will claim their data is end-to-end encrypted, but really just from the camera to the server. Flock as a company has full access to the data that's on those servers too. Mm-hmm. So a lot of citizens came and spoke at a council meeting that Paul was at, and you were up till 2:30 in the morning, 3 in the morning at a council meeting.
I went home and I didn't even want to go to bed. I think I stayed up the rest of the day.
They pulled an all-nighter.
I think that meeting went until 1:20 in the morning.
There you go.
Yeah.
Some citizens were there waiting for 6 to 7 hours to speak. That's how passionate they were about concerns for their rights and concerns about data privacy. So yes, Jacob Amos did on council request of the chief to do a town hall, and various citizens requested that too. And when that wasn't done, a large group of citizens decided we're going to host our own.
What was the response? What did they say in response to him?
That I don't know. I'm not
Okay.
privy to what kind of response Jacob got or didn't get, but it became very clear looking at the calendar and looking how quickly the next council meeting was approaching that it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
So I was really inspired by that public conversation event because the room was literally standing room only, full of not only people who were concerned about their rights, but people who are cybersecurity professionals, tech professionals, software engineers. There was a high level of knowledge at that event, and lots of really great questions were answered. And information that was generated by citizens was shared with council prior to that second meeting. I think for myself, my big concern was the lie that the FLAC rep was caught sharing was one of several pieces of misinformation that was shared previously, and I had really hoped that we would see had really hoped that we would see council vote to not renew the contract on that first night, because the quality of information that was shared didn't change overnight. It was
Right.
the chief staff demonstrating to him that the cameras did create a heat map or a pattern of life.
Mhm. And so you guys, though, had to, because the city and the police department would not initiate a town hall meeting, you held your own at the library, correct? About how many people were there? Do you know offhand?
I wish I would have counted. I think it was close to 100. It really was standing room only. If you turned
It was
around
a
and
lot.
looked in the room, it was a crowded room.
What I find frustrating as a citizen and as a taxpayer, not just in this respect, but with every single major issue that comes before the council, I do not feel like city government, whether it's the administration, the city manager and her staff, or it's the council, I don't feel like we are really being listened to or given credit that we know something,
Yeah.
Paul being one of the exceptions to that. And there's a couple others. But for the most part, it's difficult to even get some of these city council members to respond to an email, and that I find very frustrating. And that's problematic for me. You're being paid by the citizens, you're voted in by a majority of the citizens, and you have a duty, I think, to respond to the citizens. But that doesn't mean you're always going to agree, but to just disavow any knowledge that the citizens may have, it's almost like we know better, so go on, little peons, you don't know what you're talking about.
Did you get snarky? I mean, did you feel like, not you, but did you feel like you got, did you feel like you got kind of a cold response?
From individual council members, I feel as a citizen, kind of circling back to Cheryl's point, it felt like even though there was a very packed, council members had shared this is the most number of people we have seen turn up for a topic in an extraordinarily long time. It felt like even though we had a really, really large turnout, it didn't feel like we had the power to sway the decision that was made, and that felt very disempowering and undemocratic to me. That was my feeling. I'm glad the right decision was made eventually, and I'd like to see in the future more. I would like to see more representation, like reflection back to what citizens are sharing on issues like this, especially really controversial and contentious ones.
Well, you were treated very poorly by former council member DJ Nichols with respect to the Humane Society's budget. Talk a little bit about that. We're down to maybe about 10 minutes, but just give a brief idea of how poorly you were treated.
Well, what I'll share is that it was really difficult to get an audience with council advocating for the shelter. And Paul, I appreciate your advocacy for the shelter throughout this process. I want to say just right up top that what I'm about to share is my own opinions. I used to work for the Humane Society for 10 years. I want to make it clear these are my own opinions as a resident, and not any official stances from the shelter. But I have extensive experience managing the animal services contract in Oshkosh. For 5 years, I was the admissions manager at the shelter. So I know that relationship between OPD and the Humane Society like the back of my hand. I managed the whole team that took care of those services. I reached out via email. I sent DMs. I tried to set up appointments with council and found it really difficult to do that before the vote. After the vote, I found it very easy to get council members to reach out to me and talk to me about the aftermath of the decision. What was concerning to me is there was a lot of inaccurate data that was shared. The number of animals serviced by the contract, it was shared, city staff reported 112 animals. The real number was 701. That didn't include police impounds and animals being held as evidence in crimes. Data was shared about neighboring contracts, which suggested that the Oshkosh Humane Society was somehow ripping the city off. I looked up the details of those surrounding contracts, and one of the details that were shared in the press releases weren't accurate. They weren't reflective of the full picture of what's paid in those municipalities for services. So it felt like we made a decision based on really incomplete information, and I felt disempowered as a citizen, being a person who had access to a ton of that information, not being able to transmit it successfully to our elected leaders.
Well, I think a lot of information that's given out is not always accurate. It's just like right now, the discussions, if you can call them that, with regard to Oshkosh Media here. One of the things that Drew Bailey, the communications manager, said is that staff is spending 45 hours a week supporting Life TV, Gov TV, and the radio station 101.9. Well, I don't know where that 45 hours is coming from, but I can tell you that with respect to assistance with this show and one other locally produced show, I would venture to say that staff is spending 5 hours or less a week on this stuff. And, you know, and it's a city thing that someone from staff must be here when we're taping these shows. That's fine. But it's not like they're just sitting here babysitting us. What they're doing is, whoever is here on that particular evening, he's working basically a second shift instead of a first shift. So he's not spending really extra hours, but whatever time he is spending, I would say is 5 hours or less per week. The other thing that's misleading about it is, Mr. Bailey is trying to convince people that these shows aren't watched by a whole lot of people. Well, they're only pulling numbers from one place. They're not factoring in any of the numbers of viewers from Spectrum TV, the cable viewers, because they have no way of getting that from Spectrum. And so that is really very misleading right there. And the other point that I want to make, and that is that some people have said, well, this is probably about budget. It's not about budget. What the citizenry needs to know is that the city of Oshkosh is collecting what's called franchise fees, and they're collecting them from Charter Communications or Spectrum, whatever the entity is called at the top level. They're collecting franchise fees partially from the state and partially from the cable provider. And currently those are between $300,000 and $400,000 a year. So well over $250,000 a year. And so that would be more than enough to run this operation, but what they're not telling you is that they're sticking that money into the city's general budget and using it for, buying city center or a part of city center. I don't know. But this is not about money. It's not about space issues. It's about a city manager who does not believe that this particular vehicle, not this show, but community media as a whole, is something that should be part of the city, and yet they'll take money for it. So I just want to make that. But we're not going anywhere. We're going to continue doing this. Wherever we end up, we'll let you know. But we're gonna stick around. And to DJ Nichols' point, at a workshop meeting, he said, well, you can just take your smartphone and you can just shoot some video and put it on. Mr. Nichols doesn't have the first damn clue what he's talking about. You might be able to do that, but you can't do that with this kind of a show. And that's just the plain and simple fact of the matter. All right, I'll get off my soapbox. Outlet Mall. We want to talk about the Outlet Mall real quickly because Woodman's is coming in. Are they taking over? Have they bought the entire property out there, Paul? Do you know?
Yeah.
So, and that includes the stores that are out there, right?
Yep.
So clearly they're not going to have that large of a store. Is there any talk about, I looked at a map and it looked like they were allowing those stores to stay, but I don't know. Nobody seems to know.
No, the best of my knowledge from what I've reviewed was the mini putt-putt golf course or whatever will remain, and the old, was it Shoney's or...
Oh, the
whatever
restaurant right there.
That's going to remain, but everything else is coming down. And that's going to be all reconstructed.
Do we have a city, or as a city, have a responsibility? Do you think that the council feels, as a city, that we have a responsibility to sort of rehome those businesses?
Well, when that was purchased by the Woodman, whatever the LLC is, basically Woodman's, all those leases are assumable, which means that when you buy that, you assume the leases unless there's some statement on the offer to purchase stating anything different, you
Yeah.
assume those leases. And so then it really becomes the issue with the new owner and the property, or, you know, the business owners there on what they want to do.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the reasons, because I think Woodman's has owned that now for, you know, a good amount of time, a year or a couple of years or whatever. And I think they were waiting for those leases to become, you know, to come to the end where they're not maybe booting anyone out per
Okay.
se. So, you know, they understood that,
Okay.
you know, you're coming to the end.
Sure. Okay. All right, very good. So, Mike, I definitely want to hear from you on this issue. How do we turn this ship around? I can speak for myself in saying that I don't really trust what City Hall is doing. They've shown time and time again that they are not being honest. And I, you know, this Oshkosh Media thing is just one more example of how they've not been honest. So I'm very distrusting of our city manager and any message that comes from City Hall. You know, and I'm not alone. But I would like us to have some kind of a symbiotic relationship where we can work together. I don't know that that's possible, but how do we turn this ship around so that citizens can trust the messengers and their message, and they likewise can trust us?
Yeah, I always go back to this idea of proactive transparency, which sounds boring because it is, but this idea that transparency is not just meeting the letter of the law.
Mhm.
It's not just saying that, yeah, we have open records, just ask us, tell us what you want, and we'll, you know, file the request, we'll get it for you. But are we actually getting information in front of people in a format they can understand, in a format that they want it, that's conducive to their everyday life? And that takes a lot of effort, and that takes a cultural change in our public institutions. It's not just the city of Oshkosh. We have that challenge in the school district. We have that challenge in UW Oshkosh. My family jokes with me. They're like, every public institution you are involved with seems to go to hell. I'm like, well, yeah, we found the common factor. It's me. This isn't good. But no, it's happening everywhere in our public institutions. And I do think that we have very, very old ways of communicating that have not kept up with the way people are actually interpreting and accessing and using information, and that's a cultural change that has to happen within our public organizations. And I know that's a broad answer,
Yeah.
but it's going to take a generation because trust is so easy to gain, really, really easy to lose, and we're just at a low point in terms of individuals' trust of their government.
Yeah.
But
Debbie, you were going to say something?
I was going to say, you know, back, and I can't remember if this was during our time that we served
Yeah.
together. Paul and I didn't have the opportunity to serve during our times, but, you know, one of the things I think is the responsibility of the individual boards. So whether it's, I mean, when I was on council, we were quarterly or biannually meeting with the school board. We would invite, you know, the county exec. We also invited our representatives for Oshkosh for collaborative meetings. And part of that was just to have some discussions. And some of it was just strictly like, hey, what's going well, what's not going well. Because the one thing that the constituents and the taxpayers don't appreciate are surprises. You know, kind of like, oh, like, you know, you're going through that right now with the school board. Like, oh, here's our deficit. Oh, no, here, you know, here's what it is. You know, same with city council with their, you know, type of things. Nobody likes surprises.
Yeah.
So there just needs to be more conversation and more transparency. And I think at the local level, like, we somewhat unfortunately expect it at the state and the Fed, but we expect better for the local.
Okay.
And I think
Very good.
better, board members. And when I say that, I just mean better trained board members. Something
Right.
I've been doing in my day job is doing board trainings around the state. We have
Yeah.
so much about how do you run for office, et cetera,
Yeah.
political stuff. But what do you do day
Okay.
one when you get there? And that speaks
Right.
to answering emails, the kind of stuff that frustrates you.
Absolutely. All right, we are out of time. Guys, thanks for being here. I wish we
Yes.
had another
Thank you.
hour to
Thank
do
you.
this, but
Thank
we
you.
don't. So anyway, thank you to my guests, thanks to Sarah, thanks to the crew, and most of all, thanks to you. We'll see you next time. Until then, take care. Keep your eye on us. We've got All Right on Oshkosh.